Hi everybody, welcome back. My name is Aisha, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm one of your digital ELA lot teachers. Today we're going to be reviewing a couple questions from the passage Class Purposes, which is a poem on page 168. Remember, we're reviewing questions from practice test 2, which you took a few weeks ago, so it's a good idea to look over whatever notes you had or whatever you wrote before you watch this video, just so you kind of remember your thought process. Before we go into some of the hardest questions, we're going to talk about some general tips we have to approaching poetry passages. Now, we know that poetry passages can be kind of hard to understand, and in fact, we did our first digital ELA lot video. We did a poem called An Ode to Fireworks, just because that's an especially hard thing. We really wanted to make sure that you don't forget it. So in that video, we made a chart like this. It had 3 columns. We're not going to have to fill out the chart today, but in general, you should make these charts when you approach poetry passages. They should have 3 things. You're keeping track of 3 things. First is, there we go. First is who, which is characters. Second is where, which is setting. And last is what, which is main event. Now, again, we're not going to do this with you this time, but this is a really good way of making sense of poetry passages that can be kind of confusing. Now, our second and biggest tip is when you're done reading the poem, write down what you think the tone, the theme, and the symbols are. Most poetry questions will ask about those 3 things, and so if you have those 3, the question should be pretty easy. We're actually going to go over some function questions today, but if you had a hard time with questions that we're not going to cover, shoot us an email and we'll cover them in the next video. So the first question we're going to do is question 34 on page 169. The question asks, how does the similar construction of the sentence in line 1 and the sentence in line 8 contribute to the meaning of the poem? Now I'm going to put these 2 up. There we go. So we know it's a function question because it asks about the contribution that something has on the whole passage. But the question also has another part to it. We need to examine how the 2 lines are similar. In this case, lines 1 and 8, which I just put up. So pause for a second if you need to and just make note of how these 2 lines are similar. That's important to the question. Now we're going to go on to the answer choices. Answer choice E says that the constructions of line 1 and line 8 introduce the intended permanence of the structure and the ever-changing fluidity of the water. If you're not sure what permanence means, because it actually wasn't in the poem, you just have to look at the first part of the word. And what does it sound like? Permanent, which means something will be there forever. So if we go back to the lines, it seems to make sense, right? Both lines announce what characteristics the speakers have, and then examples of those characteristics. His answer choice seems correct because the 2 lines contribute to the meaning of the poem by establishing the speaker's main features, permanence and fluidity. But let's look at all the rest. Answer choice F says that the 2 lines show that a certain structure can bridge the gap caused by flowing water. Although this seems true, especially in the context of the actual poem, it doesn't connect to those 2 lines. These 2 lines don't connect those 2 things. They just state things about these 2 separate speakers. So even though this might be right in the bigger context of the poem, there's definitely nothing wrong about it in general, it's not answering the question. Don't get stuck on questions like this. I know these answer choices can be tempting, but always check your work by just looking back and thinking, does the answer choice that I picked answer the question? The answer for this is no, so we're going to cross off F. Choice G suggests that the contribution of the line is to explain that the inflexible structure has more limitations than the water does. We know this is incorrect because in the first line, the structure doesn't say that it's limited, and in the second line, line 8, it doesn't say that it's better than the other. These 2 lines aren't competing. They're not saying one is better than the other. They're just saying 2 things about the 2 separate subjects or speakers. So we're going to cross off G. Answer choice H suggests the 2 lines contrast the stability of the structure with the instability of the water. Although, yes, there's stability and instability, again, there's no contrast. These things aren't saying, just like the last one, they're not saying they're better or even highlighting their differences. They're just talking about these 2 separate characteristics that these speakers have. So we can cross off F, G, and H and go back to answer choice E. There we go, which is correct. Now we're going to go to question 37 on page 170. The question asks, the comparison to sewing in lines 33 through 35 helps show that the structure. Now, we know that this is a function question because it's asking us to determine what the purpose of the metaphor is. Let's Let's quickly read over the lines again to contextualize the questions. We stitch across the grip you make. We are the steel thread, the human needle. We bind you up. We sew you. A little scary. So this section of the poem focuses on the role the structure plays in reuniting two things. Right off the bat, we can eliminate choice A because there's no allusion to beauty. And if there is, we'd have to make like a lot of big leaps in our interpretation. So, no, wrong. Answer choice B focuses on how the structure brings people together, which kind of fits with the first line of the poem because it says that we're the steel thread to the human needle, kind of implying that, humans brought together. So we can keep it for now, but let's go back to it. Answer choice C doesn't make sense because the structure doesn't help. The structure, which we know is a bridge, helps people overcome distances, not create boundaries. As a comparison to sewing helps reference that, so no. And then answer choice D says that the comparison shows that the structure helps people overcome natural boundaries. That also fits like B. So now that we're left with B and D, let's see which one makes more sense. While B might be correct in the larger context of the poem, it does talk about bringing people together. Not these lines. These lines don't specifically say that people are being brought together by this structure, this bridge. So we're going to go with answer choice D. Remember, look for things that connect most directly to the lines that are mentioned and actually answer the question. Even though bringing people together is kind of a bigger theme of the poem, this isn't asking about the poem as a whole, it's asking about what these specific lines contribute to the poem as a whole. All right, that's it. That old video will be linked in the description down below. And if there's anything else you guys want from us, any specific questions from practice test 2, let us know. Bye.